Hi everyone, this is Dr. Avani Ratan. I am your faculty at Conceptual Psych, and today we'll be talking about social relationships. So let us start with the tale of David the Charming, and let me tell you certain things about David. So David is a graduate student who had an almost magical ability to make people like him. So I would want you to picture this, that everywhere David went, he left a trail of admirers. Professors loved him, students adored him, and the romantic partners practically lined up at his door. Now, what do you think made David so irresistible? David had mastered something we call social skills. He made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. He'd lean in when you talked, he'd find common grounds with everyone, and he would express genuine warmth. But now here's the twist. David used his charm like a weapon. He manipulated a fellow student who loved him into doing his work. His mentor, who saw him as a son, wrote a glowing recommendation for David. And then came the shocking ending. David never filed his PhD paperwork. So, when discovered, his charm bought him another year, but then he vanished. Now, the mystery remains. Where is David now? Probably charming someone somewhere. So here, this little story, it actually introduces today's lecture themes, which is attraction, relationship, love, and how they can be both beautiful and complicated. Now let us understand the internal sources of liking others, the roles of needs and emotions, right? Which is the most important part in human existence, which is the need of affiliation or the need to belong. So, imagine our ancient ancestors living in small tribes where you'd meet Grok and Uga. Yes, I'm making up caveman names. So, Grok was a loner who insisted that he did not need others, whereas Uga was a social who felt that together we are strong and by sharing we are creating more connected tribes. So, when the saber-toothed tiger came calling, guess who survived? It was not Grok, who was alone in his cave, but it was Uga and her cooperative tribe who worked together. So, what does the evolutionary tale say? We are literally wired for connection. Babies are born looking at faces before anything else. So they can't even focus properly, but they see human faces, right? So, in fact, Mondoch's research showed that newborns prefer faces over any other visual stimulus. Now, do you remember Tom Hanks in Castaway? What did he do when alone on the island? He created Wilson, the volleyball. Even in isolation, we create companionships, right? Now, individual differences in the need to affiliate. So, here, um, let's meet the three roommates. Alex, who is the social butterfly. Then there is Sam, the selective socializer. And there is Jordan, the balanced. Sometimes he craves company and sometimes needs solitude, right? And all of these three are normal. So here, O'Connor and Rosenblatt in 1996 found that we each have our optimal level of social contacts, like Goldilocks finding the just right porridge. Okay, now talking about the exclusion experiment, that I would want you to picture this real classroom scene where a professor asks three students to play a simple ball tossing game, which is the cyberball experiment. But secretly, two students are instructed to exclude the third party after a few tosses. So, what happens to the excluded student? The brain scans, they show the same areas light up as when experiencing physical pain. So, being left out literally hurts. So, the excluded student would feel a loss of control. Sadness and anger. A sense of not belonging. Right. So, Gardner, Pickett, and Brewer in 2000 found that after exclusion, people become hypersensitive to social cues and they desperately scan for acceptance. Now, are there people who don't need other people? So, let's talk about the dismissive attachment myth. Let's meet Marcus, who proudly declares, I don't need anyone. I'm completely self sufficient. He claims relationships are for weak people. But here's what Carvalho and Gabriel discovered, that when Marcus and people like him were told that they were accepted by a group, their self esteem shot up and their mood improved. Even though they claimed they do not care. It's like someone who says they hate chocolate, but their brain lights up when they smell the brownies. So the need is there, it's just hidden under a protective armor. Now, what is the situational influence on the need to affiliate? So, the September 11th effect after the 9/11, what did people do? They didn't isolate, they gathered. Churches, mosques, temples, they overflowed. People who hadn't spoken to family in years, they picked up the phone, right? So, the Scatcher Shock shop says that imagine you are in this experiment where there is group A, they are told that they'll receive painful electrical shocks. Group B are told that they'll receive mild tickling sensations. While waiting, you're asked, do you want to wait alone or with others? So here, Group A overwhelmingly chose to wait with others, facing the same threat, whereas Group B did not care. So here, the misery loves company principle comes into the being, right? But here's the twist, anxious people don't want just any company, they want others in the same boat. Why? A, because of the cognitive clarity. What's happening to us? Right? What's happening to us? B, emotional clarity. Is it normal to feel this scared? Is it normal to feel this scared? It's like being on the turbulent flight. You look at the other passengers to gauge if you should also panic. Right? Now, the role of affect. Do our moods play a role in liking others? So, let's talk about the coffee shop coincidence. So, Emma had just received an A plus on her exam when she bumped into a stranger at the coffee shop, spilling his coffee. So instead of being annoyed, she found him charming and gave him her number. Her friend Sophia had the same accident on the day she failed her exam. She found the stranger irritating and rude. So you see the same situation, different moods, and completely different attraction outcomes. So here we can see how moods play an important role in liking others. Now, the direct versus indirect effects. Let's start with the birthday party story. At your birthday party, your friend Jake brings your favorite cake and leads everyone in singing. Okay, you feel happy because of Jake. Jake is a direct effect, right? You like Jake more. Indirect effect is at the same party, you meet a stranger whose name is Tom right after opening an amazing gift from somebody else. You're glowing with happiness when Tom introduces himself. You like Tom more even though he had nothing to do with your happiness, which is an indirect or an associated effect. Okay, now the advertiser's secret. So why do beer commercials, they show beaches, they show parties and they show beautiful people? They're not selling beer, they're selling the feeling. So this is classical conditioning in action. There is a neutral stimulus, which is a new beer brand, which is with a positive stimulus, which is a party scene. And then there is a positive evaluation. So your brain would learn here, beer is equal to happy feelings and I like this beer. So political candidates, they use the same trick. They always are photographed at festivals or with babies or at celebrations. They want to be your Tom at the birthday party. Now, what are the external sources of attraction? What are the effects of proximity, familiarity, and physical beauty? So, the power of proximity is unplanned contacts. So, the MIT Westgate housing study, it says that a love story in 1950, MIT married student housing. Researchers were Festinger, Scratcher, and Back, who tracked who became friends. So the results, they read like a proximity map. Your best friend. So your best friend would usually live next door, right? This is, remember, it's a student housing. Second best friend, 2 doors away. Your second best friend would be what? Like 2 doors away? Right. Your one couple who credited their 40-year marriage to being assigned apartments with facing doors. Couples at stairway ends had more friends. Everyone passed through their door. Right. So the alphabet seat assignment romance, it says that the professor assigns seats alphabetically. Sarah Samuels, they sit next to Tom Stevens all semester, and by week 3, they are sharing notes. By midterms, they are study partners. By finals, they are dating. So, would Sarah Samuels and Adam Anderson at opposite ends ever have connected? Unlikely, right? So, this is about proximity. Now, why do you think that proximity matters? Because repeated exposure is the key. The Moreland and Beach classroom ghost, there were 4 women who were hired to attend a college class. Okay. Women first attended 15 times. The second one attended 10 times. Third one 5 times. And fourth never attended. Students just saw her photo. None ever spoke to anybody. So at the semester's end, students rated their liking for each woman. What would be the results? The more often she attended, the more she was liked. So woman 1 was practically beloved. Woman 4 was neutral. Simply being there created more affection. So what are we talking about is now familiarity. Right. Now, Zagnok's explanation. New things make slightly uncomfortable. Repeated exposure reduces fear and increases comfort. Why? The first day of class always feels awkward, But by week 3, you have your own spot, your own people, and by finals, these strangers start to feel like family.